Call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Councilman Nordby is absent. Councilmember Woods.
Here.
Councilmember McKenzie.
Here.
Councilmember Schweer.
Here.
Mayor Monge.
Here. Thank you very much. I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please.
So moved.
So move, Councilmember Schweer. I'll second. Second, Councilmember McKenzie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
All right, topics this evening. We have two topics on order tonight. First item up is 2026 budget and levy budget discussion and certification of levy discussion. I'll turn that over to our finance director, Dan Winnick.
Mayor, council members, tonight we have to have a discussion on where we want to set our maximum levy for 2026. And again, maximum levy means that's the most that we can approve in December. We certainly can have discussions and lower it down, but it ends up becoming our maximum levy. A lot of the material you're going to see tonight, you've already seen before, so I'm going to kind of walk you through it, ask any questions that you want. And then at the end of this, there's a couple of slides that are new. The very end is new. And then there's a slide in here that'll show you kind of a comparability of about week and a half, 2 weeks ago, where cities in Ramsey County that responded are kind of projecting where their levy's going to be. Again, it's subject to change. They go through the same processes that we're going to. They can change on their maximum levy, and they also can change again when it comes into approval in December. So we're going to tonight we're going to look over that proposed levy, where we're at, property tax impact, general fund budget, HRA and EDA levies, and then there's some budget items, and then for discussion and direction from City Council. So where we're at right now in a combined city HRA EDA is we're at a 5.84% levy increase. Our city has a number of components that it makes it up. It's the general fund, and you can see the general fund has only gone up about little under $29,000, or about 0.5%. And then we have street maintenance, park, and asset preservation, which asset preservation is for our facilities. Those three components are for our infrastructure. So you're seeing the street maintenance is going up 54,000, park is going up 46, asset preservation $142,000 from 2025, and then there's the debt component, and you're seeing that goes up 194,000. We've just issued earlier this year the 2025 street and utility reconstruction project bonds. So that's where you're seeing makes up that. HRA and EDA, we're keeping them the same as we had in 2025. I will be meeting, I think next week at the EDA, just so that they're aware of what we're proposing and making sure that they're comfortable with that. How did we achieve this 6% city levy? So we're overall 5.84, but the city's piece with debt and the infrastructure and the general fund is the 6%. And that was the target that our city manager set for staff to achieve to. And if you remember last year, we transferred $131,000 of penalties that we received from our electric. So we're going to continue to do that. Moving our EBA removal from the general fund to the asset preservation fund. And then we're restoring enterprise transfers that amounted to $65,000 into the general fund. And then those total about $290,000, or 3.69% levy reduction to achieve that 6%. That 6%, really what you're seeing is, if you look at the bottom part here on this slide, it's the infrastructure. The infrastructure is a 5.6% change. And I'm going to back up here. Add that 5.6% to 3.7, and you're really looking at like a 9.6% levy increase. That's what you're basically going to be faced with year after year after year, due to the fact that you're going to be funding that CIP or the infrastructure components to it. And that takes in, that right now is if nothing changes in that infrastructural plan that you've already had a few meetings on. In other words, things aren't being added to it, because then we would need additional funding. Yes?
Do we anticipate that things like the asset preservation going up $142,000, is that going to continue to be the case?
Correct.
Okay.
So the 10-year financial plans, what the dollar amounts that we have set are every year all the way throughout the plans. The only one that'll sunset a little bit earlier will be the street maintenance one.
Okay.
That one we've already had in place for a few years. So that you've got about 8 more years on that one, and then we won't have to be increasing. And that one I think is like, overall, I think it's, streets is now 3.2% of the levy. So that'll end up dropping off in about 8 years. And again, you always have the choice to reduce things that are in the CIP. Just for an example, the street program that was developed, there wasn't one. There was always the plan of every other year doing a major reconstruction project and bonding for it. There wasn't that off year in doing mill and overlays and some utility work on those components. You remember we had WSB and Morgan here saying that, hey, it first started off, you needed, about $1 million on the street side to it, and then a corresponding amount in the 3 utilities that are affected, water, wastewater, and surface water. But he put together a report, and at that point in time, our road rating wasn't increasing. We were kind of maintaining. And so we asked Morgan last year to kind of look at that again and say, how do we start to move that needle on our road rating? And that's where he came up with that we would need $2 million on the street side to it, and then a corresponding amount again in those 3 utilities. That's where we're at right now, which generates that need for that 3.2% levy increase component to it.
So we're paying for the sins of not having the CIP a while back, so we're not, that's pretty much because we didn't have the funds then to do this?
Yeah, and I mean, we're not alone in our infrastructural needs, especially on the street side to it. You're seeing many cities are facing the same piece to it. I think, an area that we probably were just, I guess, blindly not looking at was our facilities. And, we have, our 3 major facilities where we really never put any money aside to ever take care of them. And unfortunately, they're all, either at 20 or close to 20 or past 20 years. And that's usually where you see failure in your HVAC system. And tonight there's an item on City Council which came out of that Wold report for the HVAC in this facility. And that's, I think to the tune of just under $600,000. So these aren't cheap repairs. And then outside of HVAC, it's your roofs that are going to be generating a lot of money needs for it. So the plans that have been shown are trying to make sure that we can accumulate enough money to be able to take care of this stuff and try to move ourselves to more cash basis versus a debt basis on everything. Because again, you've heard me say kind of a rule of thumb that if I were to look at something and I just use, if I were to borrow $1 million for 20 years at a 5%, I'm going to be paying $80,000 in debt service every year. Well, after 20 years times 80,000 is $1.6 million. I've lost $600,000 worth of purchasing power. I showed you the comparison of a city that I've heard referenced on a number of occasions in comparisons, to the services that they provide. And that city is the city of Moundsview. And I showed you how little debt they have in comparison to the amount of debt that we have. And we're carrying that debt not just on the general levy side to it or the city component to it, but we're also carrying it in our utilities. What has that done for us over time? Well, that's what kind of has positioned us into, something not to be bragging about, second highest tax rate in Ramsey County. It positioned us into that we have very high utility rates. Those aren't great positions to be into. But the good thing is, with the leadership of our city manager and the leadership of our city council, we've developed these CIP plans, and we're trying to work our way out of it. Unfortunately, it's gonna be a burden, unfortunately, for our residents here. And, you know, because our only way of getting the money, you know, is property taxes, and that's where the levy piece comes into it. So this slide just shows you kind of where the debt, and again, you're seeing the increase is really due to the bond issuance that we issued earlier this year, the 2025 A bond, which we had nothing in 2025, and now in 26, it's $185,000 that we need to levy so we can pay our debt principal and interest payments. This slide's new information. This is where, you know, of the information in the cities that responded to where they're kind of looking at for a tax levy increase in Ramsey County. And you can see right now, North St. Paul is, you know, the lowest at a 5.84. And it goes all the way up to Arden Hills that was looking at nearly a 17% increase. So if we look at the median's at about a 9.1%, the average is a 9.43% increase. St. Paul, you know, when this went to publication, I did not see, normally they already, I think actually by their code that they have to, the mayor has to present their budget, but because of the cyber attack, they've had to delay that part to it. And I could not find anything on Falcon Heights, and they did not respond to the surveys that were sent out. So if we were to look at that total levy of that 5.84%, if there was no value change in the market value that I'm using is last year's residential home of a median value of $303,300, and if we were to look at that, we would actually see pretty much a no change in a property tax, even at this 5.84%. If we factor in what the county assessor's office is saying about our property values, that a median value of a home has increased 2.41%, and we put that in there with the 5.84, it shows that the total tax for the city, HRA and EDA, would increase just under $38 for a resident that hits this criteria, which is about a 2.7% increase. Again, part of, you know, when you see a 5.84 and it translates into a 2.7, part of it is that we did increase our dollars on fiscal disparities, about $130,000. In other words, when we levy a dollar amount, that's what we need to balance our books, to keep our operation going. Taxpayers aren't paying for that full amount, not our taxpayers. There's a fiscal disparities pool, and we're considered a winner on that because we haven't had as much commercial growth since it was established, I believe, in 1971 in comparison to the rest of the metro area. So there's that double-edged sword. The commercial, not having a lot of commercial growth here helps us as far as the fiscal disparities pool is concerned, and we're getting dollars, yet it hurts our tax base, and our tax burden truly is 90+% on our residents, and that's the difficult balance that we need to be looking at. Again, slides on the general budget, you can see from a revenue standpoint that, 57% is property taxes. That's that ad valorem taxes, followed by a little over 21% intergovernmental, and that's, police aid, fire aid, and the biggest one, local government aid. So we have a sizable dependency on other revenue sources to the tune of, 78%. That's a pretty big size dependency. So moving into the future, if we saw reductions in our local government aid, which there was in this past legislation, discussion on both the House and the Senate into making some of those adjustments, that would be a good place for them to be able to reduce local government aid. We would be directly impacted by that. Expenditures, you can see our personnel and our general fund makes up 69% of our budget. Again, and then the contractual services, followed by contractual services at 25%. So you can see, it's really the personnel component that is driving our general fund budget. And then these are the numbers that, that back up the graphs. If we look at expenditures by department, again, nothing new. We're seeing the same thing. We're seeing, police at 47%, fire just under 16. You add those two up, then we're talking 63% of our budget is for public safety. So again, maybe a little high on the 63% in comparison to other cities, and definitely of cities that are our size. They're, usually, maybe 57%, so we're a little bit on the higher side there from a comparability component to it. One of the reasons that we are a little bit higher in percentage-wise is because a lot of cities that are close to our size have a recreation department. We really don't have a recreation department. We have a recreation department as far as some expenditures are concerned, which our Public Works is really taking care of those types of expenditures, but we really don't have a dedicated staff for recreation.
Is there still a budget for that position?
Not for positions, no.
Okay.
Yeah, so if we were to ever move towards that, I know there was once upon a time, if we were to move towards that, that would be a levy increase. And you're, again, where you're sitting right now today, if you continuously, and I'm just going to round it, looking at infrastructure is going to be about a 6% base for you, and then you need to add on, and you saw we're 69% personnel. So what's going to come in personnel into the future? Well, when we move into the 2027 budget, we'll be on the third year of a 3-year contract, so we know cost of living adjustment will be 3%. There'll be step increases, per the contracts. We're going to see health insurance, dental. I mean, we're seeing them, and I know Councilmember Schweer knows this very, very well, and it's been published out there. I mean, there are, again, double-digit increases, 10, 12% increases. We're still waiting to find out what our impact is going to be, but it should not impact our budget. It'll impact our composition, but not our levy. And the reason for that, if you remember a couple of years ago, we didn't, after we went out for a competitive solicitation, we moved from PEEP to our current insurance provider, we had a decent-sized reduction. City Council made that decision, a very wise decision, to transfer that into the insurance fund. So there was $124,000 that was transferred. So that's our buffer in case insurances go above what we have included in our budget. We can cover it without changing anything in our levy for this upcoming year. Doesn't mean we won't have to make an adjustment depending on the increase that's there moving into 2027. Again, that arrives at 2027 that you're really going to be struggling to be somewhere between that 9 to 10% levy increase. And there's a reason why I keep emphasizing that, because we have some slides as an option for city councils to consider. And again, it's city council's discussion and decision. Again, HRA and EDA, we're proposing to keep the same. HRA's fund balance is pretty good for the activities that are being done there, primarily the student build housing program. EDA, same type of thing, that the fund balance is pretty good. There's really not a need to increase those levies at this point in time, so the recommendation is to keep them the same. And this is kind of where we were kind of left at. So combined, we're at a 5.84% levy increase. That CIP that we've looked at on a few occasions, To fund the parks that's currently in the CIP, we would have to add $30,000 to the levy to make that happen. That would be just under 0.4% increase. We have nothing in our budget right now for the community center. And I know that there's still discussion. There's an item after this that we'll kind of start talking a little bit about the community center and the future of the community center. The City Council's already taken some action at the last meeting. But right now, there's a need to keep what we've been doing this year at the community center. You would have to do an increase of $85,000. And then if there was a decision not to transfer that penalty of 131, you would end up adding a 1.6%. That would bring you to an 8.9% levy increase. And I have a little note that every 1% levy increase will increase the city property tax on a median value home approximately about $17. So you're aware onto that. Now, I'm going to take some questions right now, and then I'm going to show you kind of what our city manager and myself have been discussing as kind of a recommendation of where we see it, and then really going to turn it over to City Council to make the decision in the direction on where you would like to see that maximum levy be set at. The reason for that is at our next City Council meeting, I need to get all the resolutions, since it's our last meeting that we have in September, I need to get all those resolutions for you for your approval because they need to be certified to Ramsey County by the end of the month. Again, it's the max. We can always go down and you know, we've got October, November, you know, to have discussions on whatever you want to on as far as the budget's concerned before we do the final approval in December.
Okay, if we're at 5.6, is that what it is,
5.8?
5.8. If we were to go to under 8, that would cut the amount that we would need for the next couple of years upon past that. Because you're gonna cut the amount. Because if you go at 6% basically now, you're gonna go up, you're gonna have a bigger jump next year. So if we split that in half and went underneath 8 or just right at or just below 8, it's not going to affect much of the property tax for this year, and then we're not gonna be raising as much next year because the amount that's a jump would be a lot more greater. Am I right?
Yeah, that's correct. At the end of the day, taxpayers still have to pay
Well, no, I understand that.
both years. But yes, and that'll be the concept that's going to be being shown. You're way ahead. But no, you're absolutely right on.
So why have a
If
big
we're-
jump when we can have a half a jump?
That would be where it is. I mean, we're still going to have jumps. You know, 8% isn't a small levy increase.
No.
To whatever reasons it is, you know, you can see where the averages and the median of cities in Ramsey County, everybody seems to be kind of in the same place. But it's kind of like we know what we know right now and where we're at. And all indication is we're going to be at that 9 to 10 next year. So if there's an opportunity for us to increase, and that is going to be the next slide, to increase that upwards to, in the slide it'll show 8%. If we were to increase it to 8%, my recommendation would be, and the city manager's recommendation would be, that is our target in 2027, that we do everything under our powers to meet 8% or lower and not to exceed that amount. So yes, you're correct in everything that you said.
I mean, it's not a culture shock for everybody. I'm in the same boat. I pay everybody, you know, we pay we're all living in town, that if we keep it at a minimum each year we have to do it, eventually, we're gonna have some more tax base when this TIF starts in 28 and 29 from all the first of the Penn Place projects, and there's gonna be a nice chunk of money coming in from that TIF money that's been holding on for quite a while.
Yeah, so from a property tax standpoint, I'll give you just a little lesson. It doesn't bring in any more money. Money comes from what you ask for, from a levy piece. What it does do is that it increases your tax base, which then lowers down, holding all things constant, it lowers down your tax rate, which then lowers that burden on property.
Resident.
Yep.
right? See, and then that one will be coming, and then there's some others eventually down the road, but
Absolutely.
that's what I'm looking at is for the residents that hold on because it's gonna get better. We just these buildings that were built 20 years ago are just starting to come in and take hold now.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. So there's pain to get there. Eventually, when we get there, we should be in a better financial position as far as taking care of our infrastructure on a ongoing cash basis and making sure that we are taking care of our infrastructure. That's what our plan that you've supported and approved. And then in addition to that, we'll start to see some of those TIF districts go away, which then will increase that tax base. It'll be, hate to say it, pain to get there, but I think in all of our discussions, that is kind of the direction that you've really kind of thrown to us, and we got to give you a lot of credit for taking that stance, because you could have gone the whole opposite way and say, you know what, 0% levy increases. I don't know what you're going to do, but that's what you're going to do, and I wouldn't know how we would ever achieve that. So a lot of credit to you making those tough decisions.
You know, I've seen my taxes go up. What do? You know, you got to make it fair for everybody without killing everybody. And if we do a smaller jump, it won't be so bad. And you'll be able to figure out what the property basic values would be if we went up to 7.8, 7.6, 7.9, somewhere in that ballpark. And then we would hold it, if we could hold it below 8, then we can, the next year, won't be such a severe steep jump if we have to go ahead again.
I agree. I'm going to show you this, you know, where we're at today. If you remember, you know, the tax impact on that median value home with a median value increase is $38. Now I'm going to jump to kind of what you're talking about as far as a recommendation, because that is in the slide here. It would be a $74 increase versus that, you know, what did I say, 38? So it would be an increase, you know, of
At
approximately.
what rate? 8 or 7.9?
At 8.
8? Should be-
At 8. So here's where, since we've already gotten into that discussion, this is kind of in looking at the items, this is kind of where, you know, again, it's totally up to you, city council's decision, but the top line will show you where we're at today at a 5.84% increase. It's the city managers and my recommendation, if we are going to make any movement towards more of an average of where the Ramsey County cities are at, that we would add that $30,000 to the levy for parks. That $84,000 or $85,000 for community center. We retired a debt. There's still some funds in the debt that would require city council's approval to transfer, but I would transfer the money over instead of changing a levy at this point in time. So the debt that we paid off for the Public Works facility, there's extra money in that debt fund. Part of the reason it accumulates more than that is because we're required to levy 105%, taking into consideration that you may have some sort of delinquent taxes, and then it ends up getting interest and so far. And so over 20 years, it sometimes can get to a decent size. And so we do have money in there that we would be able to transfer, so we would not have to levy that.
What kind of funds is that?
Like how much? Like dollar amount? Yeah, a little, well, $512,000.
Okay.
So,
Could that go towards the building fund then, for the building?
for the buildings? Yeah, absolutely could. Yep, city council can make whatever decisions that you want to make in moving into the future. Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
It'd be nice to be able to put a chunk towards that.
You bet.
Instead of taking it down in taxes later on.
Yep, nope, we certainly can move it towards that, and then that'll adjust the 10-year plan, and maybe we'll be able to well, we will be able to, I just don't know the magnitude. We'll be able to reduce the levy that's needed for facilities. If there's consensus onto that, we certainly I can drop an item for city council's action. The 84,765 would be included in the budget process.
Can we
the
get
remain-
that, what's up on the board up here?
Yeah, we
Please.
got the people here.
We get to see you on the screen as well, but
Oh, I don't want to see me.
I like to see you like this, I like that.
Yeah.
It was there for a while, it just disappeared. Goes in and out. There we go.
There we go.
There you go, thanks. So if you were to put some of this towards the fund that they've got, that was at $1 or $2 million that is still at this community center balance or whatever,
No, community center,
Public Works.
public, okay.
It's about 512, right?
so I don't know exactly what you're talking
Guess
about.
I'm not sure.
Community center has a little money that's left into it. We would need $85,000 to have the same budget that we have basically today to cover operational costs to it. It doesn't have a negative fund balance onto it. The negative fund balance is in our fiber optics
Okay.
fund, fund, which is close to $2 million.
That's what I'm talking.
Yeah, that's where I think where you're, yeah. Which, yeah, someday, that'll end up having to be addressed, and hopefully, well, definitely, it won't be a 2 million at that point in time, but yeah, you probably will, you're already seeing some, for next year, reductions in some revenues. You're losing the library component, you're seeing some other expenses increase. Yeah, you're not going to be buying it down to where you thought you were going to be at. So at some point in time in the future, you're probably going to have to come up with probably $1.2 million to cover the negativity in that.
That just goes back to the electric fund, because that's where it came from, right?
No, the fiber optics actually is split between, I think, don't correct me, it's either water and wastewater.
Okay.
There's a couple of TIF districts that we have TIF loans from the electric that's being repaid. That's where, and that one's like 4.6 million. That's on a loan on that one.
That's where it's at now. Jeannie put it there, but it did come from electric that paid for it originally.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay.
The $30,000 for the parks, what is, it just says 34 parks. The
Right.
other things say, for this, for, specific,
So
what is the,
So what is included, and we've looked at a few times, on the CIP plan for the parks, to fund that plan all the way out, you would need the levy that's already included, plus an additional $30,000 to be able to fund that. In addition to that, there is going to have to be some discussion in the future years because the cash flow doesn't work. So it's either means some projects are going to be pushed out, or there's going to have to be an internal loan from another fund to be able to fund those projects at that level. And those are for future discussions within the city. But no different than the streets, no different than the facilities. You have the parks. This is what they need to be able to do that. And And the Parks Commission did a very nice job in compiling their CIP requests this past year. And so that's the result of what that would be.
Okay.
And then I would continue to transfer the penalty from electric. You know, penalty is not considered a component that you look at when you do a rate study, and that it's not something that you incorporate into that. If you go back to COVID, penalties were removed, and there was no penalties for a few years. So this is kind of where we're at with that. It also is for those who are paying on a timely manner their utility bills. This penalty, is actually helping, the city being able to provide our basic services, which are included in our general fund, and again, primarily our public services. So I would keep that. And then to get it up to that 8%, I would add another 100, again, I'm speaking for both our city manager and myself, because it's our conversations and the plan that we work together. Increase it 142, but it would be dedicated for infrastructure. So it'd either be, we'd budget it either to go to the streets, so then we can lower that need down, and again, I don't know the exact amount that it would be for the next year, so we can keep that 2027 levy increase instead of a double digit or close to a double digit, we can have it at, and set it at that 8%. So that's kind of my recommendation onto that. The other point, since we have a council member who knows a little bit about that fiscal disparities component to it, that, if we hold everything else constant, this raises right now at 5.84%, our rate stays pretty much the same. This will raise our rate up a little bit, which, holding everything else constant, in other words, growth, everything in the metro area, which is a long shot to it, we could end up seeing in 2027 another little increase in fiscal disparities distribution that the city receives. Again, that benefits our taxpayers.
I like what we did with the savings account for the health insurance.
Yep.
I'd like to see that for different pockets, so it doesn't get sucked into the general fund. If we can earmark like that, I think taxpayers have a little easier time when they see, okay, this money's now for buildings, this money's for that, and this is for that, instead of, now it comes in handy with the 124,000 for the health. We're not, because we would have thrown it back in the general, would have been gone, and we would have been bumping it up again.
Absolutely.
So if we can try to put things into spots and accounts where we know they are, I think it helps everybody understand what the actual costs are for this.
And that's where, your suggestion is fantastic, that $512,000, 85 of it will go here to cover, the community center for next year. The remainder will move into facilities. This 142, if city council is willing to move it to an 8% levy increase, would be moved into, let's say, streets or parks. To me, it's totally up to you. But I'd like to have it dedicated so it's not in the general fund, just like you're saying. Fantastic idea.
And that would be set aside for future expenses, not necessarily for 2026 expenses.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Correct.
That'll help us pad the next year out, because we know we're gonna have to raise it so much, and if we get that fund a little bit raised, then it may be less next year.
Correct.
Okay.
Personally,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have some concerns about the full transfer of the electric penalty. We transferred 1.5 million to the streets because we were told that, the electric fund was good. With the transfer of the penalties, one of the things Dan said earlier is we have some of the highest rates around. In some of the slides he presented earlier and at the previous council, he talked about a rate increase on electric in 2027. I can't, in good conscience, move money from the electric to the general and then tell our residents that I need to increase the rate. So I would say at the most, I'd be comfortable with splitting the difference and only transferring half the penalty, but I can't look the residents in the eye and say, I need to increase the rates on our electric after we transferred all this money out.
Quick question, how about on general, how much does electric fund give every year? As far as like 800 and some thousand, is it we transfer normally? What is it, 400? I can't remember.
300,000.
300,000, okay. That was less.
There's franchise fee piece to it. I mean, there's a lot of different tails that are a component of the electric fund. You know, the franchise fees being split between, I think, your building maintenance fund, and I can't remember off the top of my head what the other fund is. So it's not going into the electric fund component to it.
Enterprise fund this is under.
The electric fund's an enterprise
Correct.
fund, yep.
And the description of a enterprise fund is as far as bringing city more in revenue, or what does that consider when it comes to enterprise fund? Is that for that, or is it just a different way to, because it's being sold to the?
Definition of an enterprise fund would be that you're charging rates for the cost and goods services to an external party, in other words, residents, versus an internal service fund, which is to internal departments. Yep.
So would Councilman Nordby prefer to drop the rate back down to just about 6 or 7?
No, I'm okay with the 8%, but to me, we split the difference and only transfer out half the penalty to ensure that we can keep the electric rates the same, and then only fund half of the 142 that he was talking, and find a small way to tighten our belt maybe next year to not have to do the 10, but I think that's a fair compromise.
I agree with you, Jason.
So what he's suggesting is that we'd add back approximately $65,000 of the penalty that would be levied. Then it would reduce that $142,000 down below by $65,000 to still get to that 8% levy. And again, if there's consensus on that, that'll be the direction that'll put together the paperwork.
And that 65,000 will go to, we can earmark to like roads or something like that?
Yeah, my thought was the same thing he was talking about earmarking the 142 for.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that concept still stays the same. It's just the dollar amount changes because there's a different composition. But great conversation.
Troy, you have any?
Yeah, I agree.
So what I'm hearing is we'll increase $30,000 for the levy of the parks. We'll do the transfer of the $85,000 for the community center. The remainder going into an infrastructure account. We'll add back approximately $65,000 in levy, and then we'll increase approximately $78,000 in levy that'll go to the infrastructure, resulting in a levy increase for a maximum levy of 8%. All in favor of that, and then I'll be bringing that up at the next city council meeting with resolutions to support that. Good.
Everybody?
I agree with that.
Okay.
Jason, you good?
Yep, I'm good.
Councilmember Schweer?
Yeah, you may move forward with that.
Okay. Yep, you good?
All right.
That's us. Yep.
So that is the information I needed.
Thanks again for all the hard work.
Oh, no, thank you. You make this an exciting job, so this is fun. So I thank you all.
Thanks.
Next item on the topics for the workshop is discussions for the community center and grant funds. So just a little bit of the background on it and information that we've gathered up till now for different options that we've just compiled so far is, the first option is to reallocate options of reallocating the grant funds, and options for the Ramsey County Library, and options for the community center and the site itself. I know you put together this great slide here, Dan. I'm going to take it here for just a second. So the community center and grant funds, the last council meeting on August 19th, council approved the following: the contract with the EAPC Architect and Engineering for the Community Multicultural Outreach Center feasibility study was to be terminated pursuant to the contract. City will decline both federal and state grants, funds, and award for the current project. City manager is authorized to and directed to take all necessary steps to carry out the termination of the contract and the cancellation of grant funds, including notification to all relevant agencies and to explore the reallocation of the grant funds. And this resolution was to take effect upon adoption. So tonight, the discussions will be, for discussion is options for the reallocation of the grant funds, so ideas that you may have for that. So that could either go for a water tower, it could go for a road reconstruction project, or it could go for a park project. And Dan put together good options and numbers for that. And also options for the Ramsey County Library, what to do with it, where we could move it, or other options that we might have. And then also options for the community center site itself. With that, I'll turn that over to you, Dan, for the community center and grant funds discussion with the numbers you put together, please.
So we'll take each one of these topics that Brian has just talked about, and then we'll kind of try to get to a consensus of what direction City Council wants to go to or go for, so staff can start to work on those, the option piece to it. So if we don't have a lot of lively conversation, I do have Post-it notes and pens that will make you all kind of write them down so then we can think. But this is really kind of the brainstorming component to it, and making sure that we end up having very good, healthy dialogues. So the reallocation of the grant funds, when we're looking at that, the state component of that $4.5 million. So here's just a couple of items. The number 1 and number 2 are included in our CIP. 3, there's some pieces of the McKnight complex that's in our CIP, but not totally. And so the numbers that I'm pulling from came from that HGA report. So the real question is, are there other things that City Council has been thinking of that maybe you would want to have the grant funds, or at least trying to get it reallocated to?
So I just want to confirm, we've turned down the funds, and we're going to need to go back and request the funds for reallocation, correct? Okay.
Just to be clear, they haven't been turned down yet. We're working through all these options here of what direction we're going to go.
Okay, because
Yep.
your first slide indicated that we have turned them down. So I just want to clarify that
That was the direction that was given, but we're not there yet.
we have not said no to those funds yet.
That is correct.
I appreciate that you guys have put this together. I was a huge proponent of the community center, and I'm going to continue to be a huge proponent of that community center, even though it is dead. The funds that were granted to us and that were advocated for were funds for our community. And I personally would like to see those funds get allocated to something similar to the community center. And what I feel is most similar would be the McKnight complex. I believe that it could be brought into, I see a mix of not only arts and culture in this, but I also see a mixture of parks and recreation in this. This also brings the community together, especially with the plan that Parks and Recreation came together with. So in my opinion, I would say the McKnight complex first and the new Tower Park Water Tower second. Roads are always going to be there. It's going to be a consistent, ongoing process with roads. financially, we need to be sure that we set our city up for success when it comes to budgeting for these things. That is my opinion.
Okay.
I guess I kind of agree with Cassidy, but our city doesn't have the funds to completely cover the whole McKnight Field project at one time. Now, she's missing one point. When we do this water tower, it's gonna get redone on the list, in the same park. One thing that the Parks Commission is missing is they're gonna have to redesign a playground setup for that park. They can add to and from that area once the old water tower comes down, because that's gonna need a whole new revamping once they do the grading work in there. I think before we do the McKnight Fields, they might wanna reconsider doing the Tower Park playground and you can add some pickleball courts there to make it more versatile once they do the water tower, and that's gonna be coming up in just a couple years. So they could get their fund set up for that, and in the meantime, we can save money to keep working for getting the McKnight Field complex up and operating. And I'm in favor of the McKnight Field project. I think we're not ready, and we're not quite to that point yet. But I'd like to see the parks come up with a program for Water Tower Park, because they've got a very young kids' playground in there now. They could increase it by quite a bit to draw more kids in there once the Tower Park is done, or the tower is done.
Thank you. Correct.
I agree with Cassidy, with Councilmember Schweer on the fact that the grant that we were approved for was very much based on community involvement. And that's what, the community center was kind of about, was community involvement. And so I like the idea of the McKnight complex. The Tower Park playground, maybe not so much in my mind, I guess. One other option, is there anything we can do around Silver Lake? Maybe the park there, or, walking paths or anything around Silver Lake is just something that came to mind, so.
Thank you.
I want to thank former council members, Tim Cole and Lisa Wong, for getting us this grant in the first place. And I guess my feeling is I'd like to keep the spirit of the grant intact. This money was, for all intents and purposes, to redo the community center. I still believe that the proposal that I put before this council and that workshop is a viable proposal for the community center site. That we turn it into a one-story building, slab on grade, a very simple, efficient building. My thought, to accomplish that, the water tower is fully funded with the 6% increase that Dan planned. My thought is we repurpose the grant for the water tower with the caveat that we do a RFP or a proposal to find out what a basic, efficient building that we could put in the place of the community center, because we need to do something with the community center anyway, and transfer, if we agree with that plan, transfer the amount out of the water fund to cover that building. So the offshoot numbers were 1.5 to 2 million. So if we repurpose the grant to the water tower with the caveat that we're going to transfer out the money to cover what we decide for the community center, to me, that would still keep the spirit of the grant alive. It would be wise expenditure of the money. It would take care of the building that we still need to take care of. And it would also help the taxes by the remainder of it going towards the water tower fund. So that's my thought process.
That makes sense. I mean, because really, if you look at, this kind of covers parts 1 and 3 of the discussion tonight, what are we going to do with the grant and what are we going to do with the site? Part 1 would be, if we are able to get this grant and use it towards the water tower, fund the water tower with it, and then set aside the rest of that money, because then that money we could use for demolition of the existing community center, regrade or whatever we need to do with the facilities there, because we're gonna have to move some of the power equipment, the generators, the fiber equipment, and everything that's there somewhere, which is probably gonna go in Ron's building, well, not Ron's building, but Public Works. Then, it's gonna cover that as well as whatever we decide to put there, which I think Councilmember Nordby's idea of that facility, something that we can use, which would be available to the city members, the community members, for use, like flea markets, farmers markets, whatever. Whereas, I see a lot of use of Casey Lake, I see a lot of use of Housy and things like that, but it is a very furnished building. Having an unfurnished building that is kind of a blank slate, where you can set booths up or tables up or wherever, however you want, I think is a good idea. So, anyway.
And for my part, I like, the water tower is just about the same price as the grant. So we can take that and then we have this money to be able to use in the future, but it takes, this issue that, water tower for generations, water towers, how many years water towers up? 50, 60 years probably at least, around there. Every once in a while they get new guts or maybe some update, but that's something that's been a need to the northern part of the people that live in North St. Paul with the water, issues with pressure and things, where it's able to kind of like a locked, same price as what it would be for the grant is the price of the water tower. It just opens up some funds for us. I like some of the ideas, but just understanding where would be the best, but that would just take that off the table.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that this alleviates is that caveat to the grant that it must be used for a single project. So, then if we don't wind up spending all the money for the, whatever we wind up doing with the community center site, some of those funds could go towards, the McKnight project or things like that as well, so.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the demo of the building and the relocation of the library was roughly a cost of $3 million, correct? This was a while back when we talked about this.
That's if we would have built something.
My proposal, or that I put before you, or which proposal?
This is prior to new council members. This was after we discussed the funds.
I think
This is a
that's when
long
we were
while back.
deciding maybe building something on Margaret, that would be building a new building for the library. We were thinking of a different spot if they took it down. So that wasn't,
Oh, I don't remember that piece, but
yeah.
Yeah, based on the, was it EAP or whoever?
EAPC.
EPC. Their proposal, I think, talked about the demolition of the building being like $250,000, $250,000, I think, something like that. And then we still have the library to deal with, but
yeah.
I think we do have some place where they'll potentially have places where the library could go, so.
And we as a city are responsible for their location and where they go and paying for that location for till 2030?
2030 is the end of their contract currently, correct?
Okay.
So general consensus with the water tower?
What would happen if we were to sell the community center?
I would not sell the community center. This is an asset that we have in the city that would be the biggest disadvantage if we sold that area.
And that is one option that you guys would have to decide on, yes.
I know we have some issues with that area with parking and outdoor space. It'd be nice if we could have a little bit more space on whatever we do. I always think of like up in Casey where there's the room there, but unfortunately it's a little farther away from downtown. So that makes it a little bit harder too.
Yeah.
Is there anybody interested in the community center to purchase?
In looking at it right now, we have potentially one, waiting for more information back.
Do you want to jump to your next slide? I think that was for, there we go. That was the library.
One question I have for Ron, but I believe we should all be aware of this. Ron, you want to come up?
Way to put them on the spot.
Yes. I did talk to Ron just for a second, because I know one of the questions he's been asking us for a long time is somewhere to put snow. And you believe that the community center site, if we demolish it, would not be a good site for that, correct?
No, it would not. There's just not enough space there for that.
For what?
What, snow removal in the city has, and where to put it as properties go, has been a concern of his, and he's been bringing it forward. So I just wanted to get everyone on the same page that that was not a potential solution for some of his asks.
No, that wouldn't work.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
The witness may sit down. Anything else?
Okay.
So this next slide here, you know, what are some of the options for the Ramsey County Library? And you have to remember, these are not all-inclusive. These were just spitballing, you know, and throwing out different ideas. So feel free to add, subtract, whatever you think. It was just, you know, there's always that option that you could find a buyer for the community center that would keep the library. You can demo the community center except for a library space. That was the one that I remember being at about $2.5 million for the demo
you.
piece to it, because they, yeah, structurally, it'd have to go through it, and then there's HVAC configurations and that stuff that would be so costly. And it was,
It was higher than that even.
yeah, and it could have been, it was out there before, and then EAPC, I think, confirmed that it would be a high cost to it. Work with the Ramsey County to relocate the library, and then no library in the city.
I guess just looking at those options, I don't see option 2 being a viable option. I would prefer not option 4. I think there's, you know, just in speaking to members of the community, I think there's a lot of value that comes with having a small library, you know, having a library in the city. It's something quaint, so to speak, that people appreciate. So I think trying to avoid option 4 as well. I guess if we do pursue, you know, finding somebody to buy the community center, again, which would be probably, you know, 2 on my options if I were to rank these, that, you know, we put that caveat in there that if they were to purchase that building and use it, that the library has to remain in there. We would have to make that part of the contract or whatever. So I guess my preference would be to work with the Ramsey County to relocate the library to someplace available.
I actually went down and spoke to the librarian after our vote. Wanted to make sure that she said she watched it online, so she was able to, she's up to date on what was going on. She understood the expense of how much it was cost to the building compared to that, so she was understanding on that part of it as far as the money and the difference of what it would be between that and the grant. And we just trying to get a meeting together as far as with the library to see what their what their plans are for the library with some of these budget things that are coming up. And I don't think it can get on the list for a while. I think it's the end of September, but the first time they can meet with the city, if I'm not mistaken.
Unfortunately, yes. Yep.
If we were to sell the building, that purchaser would have then to repair the building himself, right? Has he ever talked, whoever it is, have they talked about keeping the library upon the purchase?
Have you've had that discussion with this person then? So you've already discussed further?
As of last Thursday, yes. Reached out and they got back to me today.
You reached out to them?
I did.
But we hadn't had any conversation about a sale of it, so why would we reach out to somebody about selling the community center?
It's bringing you guys options that you guys can decide on.
Now, if we were to sell it, he would purchase it, he would own the property, he would be paying our commercial tax back to our city, and he would be buying our electric from our electric department, correct?
Correct.
I guess, to me, we're throwing out options there. I would possibly also think about directing staff to talk to the Historical Society. They had, I believe, previously mentioned something about the possibility of them not wanting their current location anymore. Would this be a good time to create, on the site it currently is, a joint Historical Society library, and what the finances of that would look like? Personally, I want to find a way to keep the library in the city. I don't have.
I don't want to lose it either.
Right. I have concerns about selling the site. I can't see the financial success of someone buying it and saying they're going to keep the library. We can't make it work as a city. I have a hard time seeing a private enterprise doing that.
I agree with you, Jason.
But there again, talking to the Historical Society to see if long-term converting it into a combination building there could work out. I wouldn't mind staff reaching out to see if they have interest in us exploring that further.
When I reached out to Sue to talk about it originally, when the grant first came out, they were debating about that because then they could have it open up more hours, but as far as how much it costs to keep the building fixed up, it didn't help us at all. So it doesn't really get us anywhere for the money.
Well, the reason I think it could get us somewhere is basically what I was thinking was a complete demolish of the current building and just a build of a lot smaller, more efficient building. And there again, I don't know if that's financially viable or smart. But it might be worth a conversation.
Yeah. I mean, if we're just kind of throwing ideas at the wall to see what sticks, it's an option. So, yeah.
It was very, very good dialogue. We're going to jump on to this other option here, or options to look at the community center and site potential. Again, they're not in any order. They're just randomly just thrown out there. Sell the community center as is, sell the community center without library, generator, and fiber, demo the facility, relocate generator, relocate the fiber, or repurpose the site.
Has there ever been a dollar value on the amount that it would be sold for?
I don't believe
Appraisal
there's
price.
anything recent. I think there was appraisals back
I believe
4 years ago.
Shifke's and Sons years and years ago put in an offer.
They were going to make a garage out of it.
Yeah, but, and that was,
There were also appraisals that came in, but that didn't compare to what the offers that came in. I think the largest offer we had back at the time was, I think, $1 million.
That's when it was still functionable and a decent roof?
No, I think the
No.
roof was already identified as needing repair.
Yep.
And some of the other, I mean, because it's based upon useful life, so.
I don't believe that we've had any offers on the building that the people that offered intended to keep it as is. It was pretty much all demo of the building.
No,
No?
Wasn't at all. Nope.
no.
Kokio was one offer, they were gonna keep the library and.
Oh, Coco? Okay. It was just Shifky's that was gonna make it a garage?
Yeah, we're gonna,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
Keep the same building, just gonna put big doors on the side to put the crap in.
Well, if it's that, what, Kokoro? I wasn't here around when they were around here. But if they were in there once, that building on the lower level is all set up to what they had in there originally, correct? As far as offices and how they were operating it?
Well, they had a different setup than what they could have in the future. I mean, they had a chiropractor in there, sublease. They have a sublease of physical therapy, other things available in there. I don't know if they would set it up the same way, but the gym was the big part that they were.
And they just built, Dave, if I'm not, they just built a big site.
Yeah, I saw it. I see it out
Okay, so you're
on
aware of it.
camera.
Yep.
But you gotta remember one thing, the volleyball in boys' sports is becoming bigger and bigger. I bet that's why he wants to get into this. Because the guys' volleyball is starting to take off pretty heavy.
So option number 3, the demo of the facility, the estimate that we had from EPC, is that right? EPC, EP? EAP. Sorry. The estimate that we had from them was $250,000. Does that include relocating the generator and the fiber? No. Okay, so we'd still have to be on the hook for that. Okay.
We have 3 minutes. Just keep it.
So, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of continuation in the discussion onto this, which we'll end up doing. But actually, a very, very, very good conversation. So I'm going to summarize a couple at least key principles as we move forward that I've heard. One, that whatever reallocation of the funds, the grant funds, there needs to be a plan where it's going to have a community benefit. So now you can get there a little bit differently. You can do the water tower, reallocate the money from the water tower, transferring it over to do something else that's going to be a community benefit. So concept, one principle, community benefit. The other, across the board, heard, we have to keep that library. So we have to keep the library within the city. Again, could be a leased space. It could be current space. It could be, but whatever, it's a principle. So whatever options we come up with, we have to kind of identify those pieces. One other kind of component that I want to explore here with it is that the current site, if you demo it, you relocate everything, which really we need to get some costs for you to really show you what that is for, for the generator and the fiber and the demo. But would the city council be open to giving up ownership of that site, whether you sell it as is, sell it however, or it's demoed and you sell the site?
I think it would be a great opportunity for EDA to work with a developer then.
Okay.
100% the EDA should be involved with trying to understand that. And a big part of that too is we need to understand, and it's gonna be the end of September, what the libraries, what their plan is, what their long-term plan is too, because right now we're
Absolutely.
assuming,
Yep.
we don't know after this lease where they wanna be.
Right, but from a principal standpoint, from what city council is saying is that it
We wanna
it
keep
is,
what we
we
can.
want to
Yep.
keep them if we can. And it may not, absolutely, they may not be willing to do that. They'll be faced with a lot of budget cuts, moving forward in the future too. So, what they'll do with that. Can I just throw out a concept that's out there? If you were to find a buyer to buy this property, and no, I don't have anybody in mind onto it, would the city be open to selling the facility but not the land, and the land would be on a $1 20-year lease. In other words,
They've got money, they would have money to actually fulfill the need to repair the building.
well, they would own the building for 20 years. They would have to do the repairs to the facility to have it operational. But at the end of 20 years, the city would own, never gives up that land for some sort of future development. And the answer is, if not interested, just throwing it out there as a,
If we can keep the land, but they buy at the property, or buy the building, why not?
just throwing it out.
Understand how
for-
anybody benefits for doing that as far as somebody purchasing it. What happens after 20 years then?
You can write up an agreement any which way you want. There can be a buyback clause that's put into it that the city owes that person at the end of 20 years, or it's nothing. However you decide on doing it would then obviously impact their offer as a purchase price. But the principle was, and I heard Councilmember Schweer, pretty loudly that that's an asset. And so, and even with it, if the site was open, demoed and everything, you would, engage the EDA for some sort of community development. Again, pointing that there's a value to that property piece to it. So it was just a thought, just throwing it out there. But time's run out. We've got some principles. We'll end up having to plan some more discussions with some more information for city council. But I thank you very much for both of the items and fantastic dialogue. Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, we'll call for adjournment and give us 5 minutes.
So
before we do.
moved.
So move. Councilmember Troy Woods, thank you. I got stuck there. Yep, second. Councilmember Schweer. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
5 minutes, please. 6:36. Yeah, it doesn't help. Dan,